When it comes to the term Pokemon investing, the first thing that comes to mind is the idea of putting your money away in some sealed Pokemon product, whether it's collection boxes, sleeve boosters, booster boxes, putting them away for a few years, and invariably as time goes on, they go up in price, and then you eventually sell them when they hit one of your target values. But in recent years, and particularly this year, the Pokemon market has changed my mind about potentially putting my money in a different kind of product. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about why I'm getting more and more confident about modern alt arts. Let's get straight into it. Hey guys, my name is Thomas and you're watching Pokemonsta. Earlier this year, I decided to start my own Pokemon business to document the journey of your average guy trying to grind out a Pokemon business whilst working a 9 to 5. So if you're interested in following that journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Before I get further into this video, I just want to flag to you guys that I'm doing a 2 Destined Rivals half booster box giveaway on Instagram. Here is a picture of the post. Make sure to follow on my Instagram to know how to enter, and hopefully you'll be able to win yourself 2 free Destined Rivals half booster boxes. But in today's video, I want to be talking about how the market has changed my mind over putting my money in some modern cards. And by the end of this video, I'll be telling you what I'm actually doing with that confidence. What am I actually doing? Am I actually acting upon it? What am I actually thinking about buying? So I'll let you guys know that. Watch till the end of the video to figure out what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that this is a strategy that is for everyone, nor am I saying that it's going to work. It's obviously a very risky thing, but when we talk about Pokemon investing, as I've said, people usually think about putting their money in sealed products. And the main barrier for people mentally with modern cards has always been the print numbers, whether that's sealed, because I've always been a skeptic about sealed, or singles, which is even riskier because when you look at the pool of what you can select from, when you're looking at singles cards, there are just so many more cards to choose from compared to sealed booster boxes. But one thing that we can say about modern chase cards is that no one has ever disputed that the cards and the artwork are amazing. It's always mainly been the population numbers that makes people a bit skeptical about how these cards will do long term. And I was one of those people, and let's say I still approach this with some degree of cautiousness. I was always a skeptic about whether you could actually see these grow. Personally, I was always buying them because I liked them, because they were amazing cards. So I was happy to pay what I felt was over the odds when the cards were coming out, because I knew that it was going to be cards that I'm going to keep in my collection forever. And as you guys can see on this current B-roll, I have done so for my Sword and Shield alt arts specifically. Going back to the question though of why I'm more confident in these cards. Let's first talk about the market price of these cards. So I'm just looking at the cards on my table. So if you look at the Lugia from Paradigm Trigger or Silver Tempest, it's pretty much doubled in the last 3 months from £500, $650 to over £1,000, $1,200. When you look at the Giratina, that's now a 2,000 US dollar card. It's about 1.7k in Great British pounds. You look at the Gengar VMAX from Fusion Strike or the Gengar High Class deck in Japanese. That card has also gone crazy. You look at what price I bought it for on my current eBay page versus what it's worth now, and it's probably tripled in price in the last 2 years. And then the Rayquaza VMAX, which is one of the lower pop cards in Japanese and in English in Evolving Skies, has been seeing some very, very strong growth numbers. If you look at these market growth numbers in isolation for this year, that alone is not enough to make me confident in them long term. What makes me confident in these cards long term, or at least slowly more confident, is the fact that they have more than one market cycle of history. What I mean by that is that these cards came out in 2021 and 2022. So they have been through more than one boom and crash. In fact, I think at the start of last year, they were seeing a big rise and then they crashed again. And now they've seen a big rise again. So the more data that we have and the more time passes, the more mature this product becomes. And that's what's slowly giving me more and more confidence in their longevity. So I would never just hang my hats on one cycle of growth, which is what we're seeing happening this year, or particularly in the last 3 months. I forgot to mention the Dragonite as well, which has pretty much tripled in price from being a £400 card to now being a £1,000 card. So not quite tripling, but getting close to that. But if you're just looking at one market cycle, that's never a good enough indicator, I think, for the long-term performance of a product. So we go back to the principle of time and how things perform over time. And if we track what's happened to these PSA 10 modern alt-arts, when they first came out, I think that was at a time that people had no belief or very little belief in these products or these cards actually going up this much in price. So it's really over the last 3 years that I think that the opinion of the market, alongside with the card, I should say, has matured to a point where they probably actually believe that it is something that can go up in price long term. To balance that out, I'm not saying that I think that these modern cards are worth what they currently are, but what I'm saying is that seeing the prices that they are now and seeing the prices that they were in 2024 and seeing the prices that they were in 2023, 2022, seeing the ups and downs is giving me more and more confidence that actually this is not just going to be some worthless card because of its population. One other thing that I've always thought is important when looking at population and interpreting the number is you can look at it either as an absolute number, and if you look at this Rayquaza VMAX that I've got in front of me, for example, this is from the Japanese version of Evolving Skies. The pop on this is probably 2,000 to 4,000 in a PSA 10. You look at that number itself, you compare it to like I don't know, like a PSA 10 Torchic Gold Star, which is pop 20 or not even pop 20, and this is basically like 200 times more, right? But I do think that the population is also relative in a sense. So when I'm looking at these modern cards and the pop numbers, I'm thinking about how many people were engaged into the hobby at that time and have an emotional affinity and connection to these cards versus how do people feel about something that maybe they never experienced, which is, for example, Gold Star cards. And seeing the fact that after 3 to 4 years, people are still loving these cards and yearning for these cards again is giving me confidence about the popularity of modern chase cards long term. Because I was previously a skeptic about this, particularly because I was watching certain types of YouTubers, maybe who basically went off the idea that, you know, with modern cards, there's always going to be something more beautiful and better and better. But I do think based on the last 3 years that people do hold on to that sentiment that they have for Sword and Shield chase cards, for example. And we're seeing it with Sun and Moon even, which you could still consider to be ultra modern or modern, so to speak. And you look at what the Lovebirds is doing now, which is basically about 10K US dollars in numbers. I do think that what the last few years have shown me is that people do go back in time, even for modern cards, even if there's a beautiful new shiny thing like a shiny Mew, bubble Mew, so to speak. One thing that is very important for me to say in this video is that I'm telling you that I'm getting more and more confident in these modern cards. That doesn't mean that I'm loading up on them or hoarding them, especially the ones that I've got in front of you right here. So you've got the Rayquaza, the Gengar, the Lugia, and the Giratina. I haven't bought any extra copies of these, and that's purely because my own risk appetite won't allow me to be buying these things at the moment, particularly as I'm running my own business. So I believe in these cards now, but that doesn't mean that I'm buying them, but I'm translating that belief into other cards that I want to buy. So the main thing that I'm looking at is acknowledging that this is a lot riskier and a lot more volatile than sealed investing, but I'm still looking for cards that I think are cheap and therefore have a low downside risk. And what counts as cheap to you is entirely dependent on your own financial circumstances. So the sweet spot for me for cheap has actually been 200 to 400 pounds for something to buy. So that's like $280 to $500. But maybe for someone else, they consider something that's $800 to be cheap and they'd be willing to put their money down into it. But the principal guiding factor for me, really, when I'm looking at this is still what the total cost is at the moment, because that ultimately guides how much I think something can go up as well as how much I go down. But still, the most important thing for me is that I actually like the card. So to give you an example of what I've picked up recently, multiple Dragonite V alt-arts from the Japanese version of Evolving Skies, i.e. Blue Sky Stream. I've sold some and I kind of regret it, but obviously it's good for the cash flow. But I was buying those at 215, 235, and I think I got another one at 250. And you look at the prices now, it's something that no one will be paying attention to because all of the attention is on English at the moment. But even if you look at the Japanese version of that card, it's gone up to like 450 to 470. Again, that doesn't mean that it's not going to go down. But for me, I love that card. I think that sleepy Pokemon are very, very popular at the moment. And actually, it's my experience through vending that made me realize just how popular Dragonite is as a Pokemon. You know, it's not something that I would have known myself if I didn't vend, if I didn't go to shows, and if I didn't have people constantly asking me if I had that Dragonite card in English. But as I'm a Japanese specialist or a Japanese lover, and the price point of the Japanese made more sense to me, the Japanese is what I picked up. Another example of what I picked up is the Bubble Mew in Japanese again. You look at what's happening on the English side and that card is going up to like 2,000 bucks. But on the Japanese side, the PSA 10 version of that card was still sitting at around 200 pounds. And from my personal experience, I knew how difficult that card is to pull in Japanese. So that card comes from the set of Shiny Treasure EX, which has about 7 special illustration rares. But unlike Terrestrial Festival, you are not guaranteed an SAR in Shiny Treasure. So from my experience of opening about 25 boxes, I pulled 3 SIRs, which means that there was about a 1 in 7 to 8 box pull rate for SIRs, and then you still have to hit that specific Mew. So looking at all of that in person and seeing that Bubble Mew, in my personal opinion, is the best card of the Scarlet and Violet era. I bought 2 PSA 10 Bubble Mew cards, and even for my own appetite now, I think the price is maybe a bit too high for me to go in. So I'm gonna look for the next thing. I'm gonna look for the next card that I like. But where I'm moving my interest to now is that with the confidence that I have from the Sword and Shield era, I'm actually starting to look at Scarlet and Violet cards. And I just picked up an amazing card from an ultra modern set. But when I look at it, it just feels like it's too cheap. What I hope you can take from this video is that as I've explained my thought process through the cards I've picked up, hopefully you can tell that I'm actually a big fan of these cards, and that really helps with dealing with the downside risk, because ultimately if it never goes up or if it never hits a target that I'm happy to let it go at, it stays in my personal collection. And ultimately this feeds into a wider discussion of what investing actually means. And what it means to me is that there is no one that's purely 100% into investing or 100% into collecting. And this type of thinking for me is the perfect example of the mix between collecting and investing that makes this hobby so fun. Because as I've said in my last video, ultimately this is the only reason why these collectibles have value is because of people's emotional attachment towards them. As I've said, I picked up some Dragonites, I picked up some Bubble Mews, I've actually picked up some Blastoise SIRs from 151 as well. And I'll just be looking for the next thing. I'm just looking at cards that are still cheap for me, and as I've said, for my budget it's 200 to 400 pounds. For you it might be something else. I'm doing something that I've not done before, because traditionally I have only ever thought of investing, so to speak, from the perspective of putting my money into sealed. But now I'm thinking maybe I want to try something a little bit different because I can afford it, firstly, and secondly, I want to see. I have a higher risk tolerance than I used to have, and I just want to see what results that brings. So to finish off, I'm getting more and more confident in doing this as a viable way of actually making money whilst doing something I enjoy. Whereas previously I only thought it was for sealed. Hopefully you guys learned something from today's video. If you did, make sure to like, comment what you think, subscribe, hit that hype button if you can see it, and happy collecting.